All right, let's go ahead and discuss the new assignments for week two. So we have a new uh, project. We have a new game. We have a new soundtrack. A new style of game requires a new approach to the music. And so our game this week is called Angry Bots, and it is a demo that is provided by Unity Games. Again, this game is built in the Unity game engine. Next week, in week three, we'll start talking more about the technology, and we'll discuss game engines and audio middleware and some of the software and tools that are kind of running all of this stuff in the background. And like I've said before, saying like game engine is like saying DAW, kind of, sort of, not really, but sort of. Basically, in the same way that a DAW is the tool that you use to make music, a game engine is the tool that a game developer uses to make a game. And just in the same way that there's Logic and Pro Tools and they give away free projects and like, here's some recorded music for you to check out and test out how our software works, they do the same thing with games. They can provide versions of the games that people can tear apart, and we can get in there with our music and sound effects. So, our new game for this week is a different style of game, different approach to gameplay overall. In Angry Bots here, you are this mercenary infiltrating a robot factory. The robots are none too happy that you're there, and they are bent on your destruction, so they will come after you. And your job is to kind of go further and further into the game world. This is a much more complete game. There is more stuff going on. Let's see here. Where am I? More stuff going on than 2D platformer, or more like there's like a beginning, a middle, and an end. Where 2D platformer, the score would just go up and up and up. This one, there is like an ending to it. You can actually beat the level. It's not a full game. It's just like one level of what would be a much larger game. But it takes about 5 or 10 minutes to complete the first time. And this one is kind of a much more futuristic, techy designed world. Lots of kind of sci-fi influences, robots and explosions and lasers and rocket launchers and sliding doors and technology and all sorts of interesting things for music and sound design. It's not probably an all ages, family friendly kind of game. Much more kind of dark and intense. And our main focus with the music is the idea of ambient and action, switching back and forth between lower intensity ambient music and higher intensity action music. When I talk about ambient music, I don't really mean the style or genre of ambient music. Not like Brian Eno, Music for Airports, kind of just a slow drone that never changes, never does anything. Ambient just means less than action. Sometimes it's known as battle and exploration. But this is the idea of there's a period of time in the game where you're just kind of wandering around the level trying to figure out what's going on. And lots of games do this, where there's a period of time where you're exploring, and then all of a sudden an enemy jumps out and there's battle music. And the battle ensues for a particular period of time, and then you either win or lose the battle, and you move forward from that. So same sort of thing here. We have to, if you did nothing else in the game, if you just sat there in a corner and hid forever, you would hear this ambient piece of music. Ambient doesn't mean just a drone, just kind of slow and boring. It can have energy to it. It can have good instrument layers to it. It can have drums and bass and harmony, maybe even melody, but probably we'll leave that up for other pieces of music. But it can have structure to it. It can have development, and it really shouldn't just be one slow drone that doesn't do anything and just sits there. There would be an ambient piece of music until a battle happens. And when one of the battle happens, one of these robots comes out to attack. And you'll notice that the battles are pretty short, right? So this guy wakes up, he comes to attack, you only hit him a couple of times, and he explodes. This guy comes to attack, and I kind of toy around with him a little bit, run away, let him chase you. And eventually, you'll either destroy the bad guy or the robot, or they will destroy you. And whenever these battles happen, the action music comes in. And then when the battle is over, the action music will leave and return back to just the ambient music. The ambient layer or the ambient cue will always be there, will always be playing. And when you fight one of these robots, then the corresponding piece of action music will come in. There are 3 different types of robots, and each one of them has a different action cue or action theme that's attached to it. And whenever you battle that particular robot, you will hear its action theme. And then when you defeat that robot, that theme will eventually go away. It'll fade out. So you have an ambient cue, and then you have 3 action cues that represent each of the different robots. They can play at the same time and will play at the same time. So you will, no matter wherever you are in the game, you will always be hearing the ambient cue. Then one of these battles starts and the corresponding action cue comes in. So we have to understand, how do we add or subtract this action music whenever we want. That's one of the main challenges here. We have to be able to get into a higher intensity action piece of music and then return back to the ambient piece of music as seamlessly and invisibly as possible. So, how does the game know when a battle is happening? And the answer to that is it uses health points. It uses, you have health points, and the characters have health points. You might not notice, but this yellow bar on his back is actually a game meter or a health meter. And it tells you how long it takes. A lot to destroy you in the game, because it's mostly just to test out and have fun with it. And defeating one of these robots doesn't really take all that much time. So we'll have to discuss how we get back and forth between this lower intensity ambient music and higher intensity action music. Let me explain each one of the robots. The first one here is called the Buzzer Bot. This is the kind of flies around, is sort of annoying. It zaps you with these little lightning bolts. These guys are called the Spider Bots. They're basically bombs on legs. They come after you, and if they get close enough, you'll either destroy them, or if they get close enough, they'll self-destruct. They really don't do much except for chase you around and become annoying. These are the most frequent kind of robots on the map. There's another one over here. And let's go inside here. So, and then here is the third robot. This guy's called the Mech Bot. It's this big RoboCop-looking robot coming down the way here. These I would kind of consider like a mini boss. They're kind of harder to destroy. You have to unload into them to eventually defeat them. And then there's just the same robots across the rest of the map. The good thing with the music and sound is we really only have to focus. I mean, you really are you see everything in the beginning of the level, and all of your music and sound effects will be populated through the rest of the game. So let's go ahead and bring up some of the other material. Let's see. Here's the PDF that you get. Hello? Is that not working? shrink down. There you go. Okay, so here's the PDF you get. It discusses all sorts of different aspects of the composition of the project. You have action and ambient cues. Why do I keep turning away? There we go. You have action and ambient cues and a discussion of each one of those. How to play Angry Bots, hopefully, should be relatively straightforward, not too difficult to control. You can use the arrow keys to go up, down, left, and right. You can use the mouse to look around and then left click or just click on your trackpad to fire. There's a couple of listening tracks as reference. Different classic games in the style of this kind of sci-fi action game. Musical style. Here we're really looking and focusing on intensity. We want to make sure that whenever those robots come after you, that it's really powerful and strong and intense. You need to feel like the danger of these robots coming to attack. Nothing too chill, nothing too laid back. Sometimes I hear some music and it's like, hey, robots aren't so bad. Let's go ahead and have a cup of coffee or something like that. And they're like, yeah, sure, that's no problem. Which is not what you want. You want intense and strong and loud, and robots are chasing you around with lasers and missile launchers and all sorts of crazy sci-fi sort of stuff. So you want to match that aesthetic. On the other side of that is another thing that I get that is better, but it doesn't work too well, is like Robot Dance Party, where everything is like super hypey dance and not that dark or intense. It's like party time, and that doesn't necessarily work either. So intense and strong instrumentation. I have suggested instrumentation, synths and pads and driving bass lines, gated effects, sweeping filters, bouncing delays, fast percussion, heavy distorted guitars, big fast drums, large brass and strings, cymbal swells and impacts, anything that portrays strength and intensity. Then there's descriptions of each one of the cues, which is basically what I'm discussing now, and how they'll play back. What I really want to get to is the asset list down here. There's screenshots and descriptions of each one of the robots and how they should sound, and just a general overview. Then the asset list. There's a total of 7 files that you will create for this. I mentioned 4 of them so far: the ambient cue, buzzer action, spider action, and mech action. They're each going to be 1 to 2 minutes long, and they will loop 16-bit 44:1 stereo. So don't think about this as 4 individual 2-minute long compositions. Think about it as one composition that can be broken down into 4 parts or 4 stems. So each one of these layers is going to contain unique instrumentation. You shouldn't repeat any instruments between the different cues, so that when you hear those particular groupings of instruments or that thematic line or melody or instrument, whatever it is, you can recognize whatever robot's coming after you. You almost train the player with the music so that they can hear what's coming up next. So let me explain how these 4 files work, and then I'll get into these short stingers here. So when the game starts, if nothing else is going on, you are always hearing the ambient cue. Through the entire game, that 2-minute long ambient cue will be looping around and around. The ambient cue should be subtle. It shouldn't be too much in your face. It can still have a bit of rhythm to it. It doesn't need to have strong percussion, but it can maybe have some hi-hats or a arpeggiated bass line, or some sort of gated effect that will foreshadow the rhythm that's coming. And you should you want to lay down the foundation of the progression. This is going to map out how things are going to play back in the how all the layers are going to play back together. All right, so we hear the ambient from the beginning of the game. As soon as you've been attacked, You either shoot the robot or the robot shoots you, then the action music will come in. The action music will come in immediately. It will start playing from wherever it is in the loop, and you will hear action music. This point, you need the strong percussion. You probably need a couple of layers of percussion, bass line, harmony, and probably a thematic. I don't necessarily want to say instrument like a melody, but thematic. Thematic line or thematic instruments or something that tells you what robot is coming after you so that you can give that sort of information and help the player. All right, so first guy, the battle starts, and as soon as he's destroyed, the battle ends. The music's going to start fading out at that point. Then these guys jump awake, the spider music will start, and as soon as they're destroyed, it'll stop playing and it'll fade out over time. So let's go ahead and load up some examples here. Talk my way through a couple of examples of what this might sound like. There we go. All right, so as stated before, you are going to have 4 2-minute, somewhere between 1 to 2 minute long cues or layers, or even maybe think of them as stems that can play back together and play at the same time. The biggest challenge here is going to be dissonance and clashing notes. You want to make sure that there's a lot of similarities between these cues. They need to all start at the same time. They need to end at the same time. They need to be in the same key, in the same tempo and same time signature, and they need to all loop together. They need to follow a common chord progression, because even if they're in the same key, if they're all headed to different chords at the same time, it's going to probably not work so well. So you need to, with all of the things that are the same, key, tempo, time signature, looping, starting, stopping, the things that are going to be unique are your choice of instrumentation. Each cue should have unique instrumentation that's only found in that cue. You really shouldn't repeat any instrument lines. You shouldn't copy anything, because when the game puts it all back together, it's going to double things up. Like if you have the same drum pattern in multiple cues, when you play them all together, then that drum pattern is 4 times as loud as everything else. So make sure that you have unique instrumentation, and then a unique composition. Each cue should have certainly a strong rhythm. That's going to be most of the action part. And then a thematic melodic line or thematic instrument or thematic phrase or something like that that helps identify whatever robot it is. Probably a bass line to help, although you don't need necessarily a bass in all 4 of them. A chord progression, but you don't also need to put all of the voicing of every single chord in each one of the cues, right? So you write your chord progression, you're going to have 3 or 4 voices per chord. Well, all 4 of these don't need to have all 4 voices every single time. Maybe one of them is just the root, follows the foundation. Another one, you've got the 3rd and the 5th. Maybe another one, you get the 1st and the 5th, if you've got 7ths in there. And you can start, if you write out the chord progression first, you have a basic common structure or skeleton to work from. So let's go ahead and check this out. Just get started here. Let's play. Start with the ambient cue. All right, I am going to play the part of the game, just mixing these up and down. And the whole reason this thing is going to work in the game is because when the game starts, all 4 of these pieces of music are going to start, and they're going to play together. They're going to reach the end and all loop together, so they're going to constantly be in sync. The only thing is, the player's only going to hear this first one at the beginning. The 3 others are going to be silent. Then the buzzer comes in. So let's do this. Game starts. Game starts, and you hear just the ambient cue. And then once you get attacked here, that's the buzzer bot, and so the buzzer music will immediately come in. And you're going to hear that buzzer music as long as the battle's going on. And then once you defeat that robot, it's going to start fading out. And the game is going to do this a whole lot better than I can and control it in the DAW. But it's going to fade that out. And whenever that robot attacks, that music comes in. So this is the buzzer by itself. So we've added the low strong strings. You got some big timpani hits in there, big low bass drums, and there's these little white noise sweeps somewhere, I think, in here. There you go. So it adds a little bit of layers. So this ambient cue is mainly made up of, has a hi-hat pattern in it, but mostly is a chord progression. This is outlining the chord progression. No, it's a couple of notes that are just kind of presenting the foundation of that chord progression. Here in the chat, it says, so that means we're making tracks separate, so that means the music can't clash. Yeah, you are probably best to think about it as one whole composition. So what I end up doing in my composition session is I'll set up a region just like this, like a particular length that depends on your tempo of your music, and you'll count out how many bars will fit, how many bars you want to use that will fit with between 1 to 2 minutes, and then just start adding instruments. I would often start out with a basic just piano. Just start writing your chord progression, even though it's going to end up probably very synthetic and very electronic and all that sort of stuff. Start out with a piano or a basic keyboard patch. Write out your chord progression, maybe write a few melodies that could work with it, figure out what instruments you're going to use, and then just keep stacking them on top of each other so that it becomes one cohesive composition. But eventually they're going to be bounced out separate from each other so that the game can use them individually as it needs to. All right, so that is the buzzer. And once that buzzer is defeated, it eventually fades away back to the ambient. And then you go after the next one. So this spider pops up. When that spider pops up, the music is going to immediately add in the spider cue. It sounds like this. Hi-hat, bass line, a little melodic line that we'll hear is actually a double of the mech cue. Here it is with the ambient. And then this guy's destroyed. This guy chases around a little bit. When that guy's gone, the music will fade out. Until you get after this guy. And this guy is the mech bot. And he comes and he attacks, and it sounds like this. So with that one, you've got strong brass and strings. You basically have the high strings to match the low strings from the buzzer cue. You've got a strong lead melody. This one, where's it coming? Right about here. And you also have the ability to have 2 or even all 3 robots on the screen at the same time. So we could bring in the buzzer cue. Bring in the spider cue. And all 4 of these cues should be able to play together. No clashing notes, no clashing rhythms. Again, think about it as one cohesive composition that with multiple layers that can play at the same time. There are 3 other files that are listed in the asset list. The music buzzer stinger, the spider stinger, and the mech stinger. And those are there to help the transitions from the ambient into the action. The action cues are going to hit quickly, and you do not know where they're going to be in the music. So to help this transition, we add in stingers. And stingers are going to play when the action cue is introduced. So let me give you an example here. I'm going to divide this up like how it will sound in the game. Just kind of set this up so everything is set up correctly. Something like that, something like this. And then we'll put fades. So we got a fade out there, and fade out there, and fade out there. All right, so when the buzzer action comes in, when it comes in here, you'll notice that the buzzer, it'll come in probably in the middle of some phrase somewhere, doesn't have a strong impact, just kind of jumps up. So, I was actually at the end of a sweep there. That's actually kind of luckier than it typically is. Turn off my fade there. Thank you. Let's play that again. So it just comes in there. And so to hide that sudden transition, we can throw stingers in here. And the game, again, the game's going to do this all for you. A stinger should hit have a strong impact at the front and fade out to silence very quickly. It's meant to distract and create a little bit of interest at that whatever the random point that's going to transition, provides a little bit of consistency, even though it is kind of just going to be a random point. If you're familiar with electronic music and like drops and impacts and things like that, that is commonly what a stinger could be. Stingers are typically have a strong impact, maybe some low end, maybe it could be a drop, and then there's another layer or two on top of what I call like some modulation or some filtering or a pitch drop or a filter sweep or a synth arpeggiator or something like that. These are all kind of strong impacts. They should not be tonal. They should not be rhythmic, because since you don't know where they're going to be played, it might clash. So strong hit, lots of reverb, tails out to silence. There's another one. And like I said, they are there to cause a bit of distraction as you're going from one piece of music to the next. So here's what it might sound like when played against the action cues. And again, the game does all of this for you. You just have to create the material. So it should provide a hit, and then the one should fade out, and the other piece of music will already be there. Here's another one. And here's a third one. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of where to start with the composition. I'm going to play one more here. Let's get rid of that, and this, and this. All right, here's another ambient cue. So this would be a good example. This would be a good example to say that the ambient cue doesn't need to be boring. It doesn't need to not move or do any or have any changes to it. Here you can hear the outline of the chord progression. You hear a arpeggiated phrase. You hear some percussion, but it's not like a kick, snare, hi-hat pattern. It is sporadic and meant to provide emphasis. Here is the buzzer cue. Here it is by itself. So it follows along, it's got a little melodic line to it. It's got drums, that's probably the most important thing to add for the action cue. Here's a spider. This one's mostly drum kit. Mostly drum kit, got a lot of crash cymbal in there. And here's the mech. Mech sounds cool, it almost sounds like an alarm going off. You definitely have to watch out when all four of these are playing to make sure it doesn't completely overload the master. But a common progression, a common pace, a common rhythm to it that allows each one of these layers to be added and subtracted at any point. Then the game, whenever a new idea comes into play, it can just fade in the corresponding piece of music as necessary. So hopefully that helps in describing how the composition is going to be set up. I do want to show off a couple of things with the sound effects for the sound design this week. Please let me know if you have any questions as we go along, or if you're just watching the archive, then you can send me a message if you need any sort of clarification. So that's the compositional side of things. You also have the sound design, creating sound effects for Angry Bots, 22 sound effects. Again, this is, like I said before, because it's a little futuristic and robots and weapons and things like that, explosions, there's a lot of fun opportunity for sound design. So let me just load up the sound effects. And I would suggest that you do something similar to last time, where you would load the original sound effects into Logic and use them as reference. So let's see, I'll close down this session. Don't save. Get a brand new session here. Now, when you go download this assignment, you are going to get a folder that looks like this. It's called Angry Bots Original Sound Effects. And it's going to, you unzip it, and it's going to have two folders. One is called To Replace, and the other one is called To Use. There's a total of 60 some odd sound effects in the game, and I don't require you to do all of them. You can use some of the original ones to supplement them. So the one that's called To Replace, these contain the 22 sound effects from the original, these do contain the original sound effects, but these are the ones that you will have to do for the assignment. And the reason is these are the more interesting sound designy kind of sounds, if that really makes any sense. They are the more obvious weapons and robot kind of sound effects. The ones to use, these are some ambiances and interior shots. Then there's like bullet impacts and ricochets, and then there's also footsteps. So you're probably not going to win any awards off of your footstep design. You're not going to get hired off of your ricochet. Well, who knows? Maybe you would. But more likely, this is a focus on the music and the and more important sound effects. So something to consider, but we definitely are going to do and replace the to replace. I include the other ones there because you can and are encouraged to do all of it, so that whenever you show this off, you can say, I did everything in this game. Otherwise, some of the original sound effects will be there still. But let's just use the To Replace folder. I'm going to take all of these sound effects and I'm going to drag them onto a track here in Logic. Open, place all the files on one track, yes. It always comes up with, actually this one doesn't. If it comes up and asks you if you need to change your sample rate, just change the sample rates of the files, that's fine. You're going to bounce them out anyway. All right, then once you have the original sound effects on here, you would probably spend some time, you'd probably clean this up a little bit. They don't need to be right on top of each other. So take these and separate them out a bit. Oh, that didn't work. Well, Logic, come on. You can cooperate with me. There we go. Do that. Do that. And you don't need to watch me do all of these. But just trust me, separate them out a little bit so that there's a little gap in there. So when you bounce everything, you have a little room. Then you would create a couple of blank tracks down below. And build all of your sound design directly below the original sounds. But listen to the sounds as reference for what they should sound like, how loud they should be, what's the shape or like the waveform look like, how loud is it, how long is it, just the basic properties of that file. And then you would build your own sound effects down below. I'm going to cheat here and just drag these down. You would not do this. Don't do this. This is a bad idea. But basically, if I were to fake it, these would be all of my effects. And you definitely mute out the originals when you bounce. You don't want the original files in there. They're really obvious to hear. And you have, then you'd bounce these out and you'd have your sound effect. And you'd go through and design all of these. Let me actually play these. I think this is going to work. Let's see if these broadcast. Airlock door close. That did not work. Hold on. How about this? Let's try that again. There it goes. Okay, this is airlock door close. There are a lot of doors in the game. There are all the Star Trek kind of doors that open and slide open and close and do all that stuff. So there's a door open. There's a door close. And the assignment has pictures of everything so you can play through the game. You can see what's what. A lot of times you can get away with the close just being the reverse of the open. Maybe there's a little like chunk, like ka-chunk at the end as it locks closed. But with these, you can use with hydraulics, pneumatics, servos, motors, those kind of things give you those kind of great mechanical sounds. Ambience, exterior rain. It's a rain loop. 30 seconds. Yours doesn't have to be that long, but just a consistent rain clip that you'll hear when you're outside of the robot factory. Interior hum. This is when you go in. This is like room tone. I always think that sounds like the inside of a spaceship or something. Like, as if I knew what the inside of a spaceship sounded like, but I'm sure. Something like that. Flying buzzer destroyed. There's a lot of sound effect. There's a lot of explosions. So the two main things in the game are not main things, but things that have a lot of sounds are doors opening and closing and explosions. So what I would suggest that you do when you go do the sound design is you should be familiar with like the Westar Music Library to get access to sound effects there. There's another resource called freesound.org, which is a website. It's kind of a community-driven website. Westar is great because it has a whole bunch. It has the Sound Ideas Library, which is a great, like, very high-quality sound effects library. Freesound.org is community-driven. There are lots and lots of sound effects on there. There's also lots and lots of very bad sound effects that are not worth anything. But there's also some very good stuff in there. And for the types of things you're trying to do, a lot of that stuff can be covered there also. So what I would do is say, okay, I need explosions. So go off and search for a whole bunch of explosions, bring them back in, and then combine them all together to make the sounds that you need. Don't work on one sound at a time. Don't say, I need a flying buzzer explosion. Go find an explosion, bring it back, edit it, name it, bounce it. Then go, oh, I need a mech explosion. Then go back out, get another file, bring it back in, edit, name it, format. Like, that takes too long to go back around and around and around like that. Do it in chunks. A lot of times when I do sound design, I'll spend one day just looking through sounds. Like, just go find my library of whatever it is, and I'll just go, here's 25 sounds that I'll eventually put all together. Then maybe the same day or maybe the next day, I'll go back and I'll just edit everything, put them all together, layer them up, see what works. Then often, if there's time, I might have another day that's just like mixing and bouncing and formatting and delivery, like finalizing everything. So if you work in big chunks like that, it often makes the process a bit easier. This is Zap Electric. This is when the lightning bolt kind of shoots out and zaps you. Mech Alert. All of the robots have an alert sound when they recognize that you're there. They kind of wake up and attack. So there's kind of an alarm sound there. Mech Destroyed Explosion. It's an absolutely huge sounding explosion, which is good for that very large mech robot. These are patrol mech footsteps. As that thing is walking down the hallway, you will hear these footsteps for footstep 1, footstep 2. I think they completely cheated and used the same sounds. You could probably make it a little bit more interesting than that. Missile explosion. So this is when it fires at you. So it shoots its missiles at you, which is this shoot missile sound. So it fires them, and then it either hits you or hits a wall or something like that and explodes. The spider alert. Right? So a little couple of beeps as it wakes up. You don't have to do exactly the same thing. Just kind of do some other stuff. I've heard really cool things where people have done like vocoded robot voices when these things like wake up and it goes attack or something like that. Spider Destroyed Explosion. These are the bombs on the... That's when you destroy it. This is when it self-destructs. I think that is a horrible explosion sound. It's a real big letdown compared to the other explosions. Proximity. This is when the spider bots are coming after you. They beep. And it's very important. Just make that one little beep. And you don't want it to be very long, because what happens is as it gets closer to you, the beep gets faster and faster. It goes beep, 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 beep. And so if you have like a long sound, that's just going to stack up and sound all sorts of crazy. So all you really need is one really short sample. Spider self-destruct, that's the bad explosion. Interior doors open and close. These are the Star Trek doors that slide open and closed. I just think that sounds like somebody's window being rolled up or down. Locked door opening. Once you get, you stand next to these computer terminals and you hack the computers, and it allows these locked doors to open. Player death. This is when you die. That's not true. That's a gunshot. That is the incorrect sound. Let me get that out of there. Player hit. This is when you take damage. Player shooting. This is the gunshot sound. It's pretty important with that sound. That is going to be a looping sound. And it is important that you match the timing of those shots, because I think it matches the animation or the muzzle flash in the game, which is this. So this is player shooting. Oh, muted. Right, so that's just a loop going around and around. You would probably be best served 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 in here. Just build your shots right below that and just use the same timing so that it creates this kind of smooth loop overall. And the last one is, I think it's the last one. Yeah, terminal hacked. Right, just some sort of electronic sound as the terminal is being hacked. I've heard people like typing on their computers, or it sounds like a keyboard, or there's a voice in there that says terminal hacked. I don't know why a computer would tell you it's been hacked, but whatever. So that hopefully, again, will give you a good direction for your sound design. Always make sure that you mute out the original track. Don't include the original sound effects in there. Create 22 sound effects for Angry Bots. And I think that should be it. That's certainly quite enough for me for this afternoon. We did the peer review of the submissions, which was always great. Again, it hopefully encourages everybody to submit also for next round. And then we talked about your Angry Bots and your Angry Bots music and sound design. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post them up in the chat or send me a message. But other than that, let's go ahead and wrap it up there. And I'll see you again on Thursday. All right. Thank you very much.